wanna be. Working like a dog all day ain't working for me. I wish I had a rich uncle that'd kick the bucket and I was sitting on stacks like Warren Buffett. I know everybody says money can't buy happiness, but it can buy me a boat. It can buy me a truck to pull it. It can buy me a Yeti 110 ice down with some silver bullets. Yeah, I know what they say. Money can't buy everything, maybe so, but it can buy me a boat. They call me a redneck, white trash, and blue collar, but I can change all that if I had a couple $1 million. Hearing that money is the root of all evil, and you can't get a camel through the eye of a needle. I'm sure that's probably true, but it still sounds pretty cool, 'cause it can buy me a boat. It can buy me a truck to pull it. It can buy me a Yeti 110 ice down with some silver bullets. Yeah, I know what they say. Money can't buy everything. It can buy me a boat to float down on the water with a beer. I hear the Powerball lotto is sitting on 100 mil. That'll buy me a brand new rod and reel, and it'll buy me a boat. It can buy me a truck to pull it. It can buy me a Yeti 110 ice down with some silver bullets. Yeah. It can buy me a boat. Yeah, I know what they say. Money can't buy everything, maybe so, but it can buy me a boat. It can buy me a boat.
We have this phrase around here. Sometimes we say, it's church just different. That's what we mean. Everybody here's probably heard the old adage that money can't buy happiness, and we all know that that's true. We could tell 100 stories of people who are exceedingly wealthy and also at the same time completely miserable. Of course, we always think we'll be the exception. And when I pray, I say, God, if you'll make me rich, I'll handle it well. I know all those other people can't. That's what they all say. That's what we all say. But it doesn't change the truth that money can't buy happiness. Money alone is not the answer to our lives. And the pursuit of money will lead to one more year of regret because money can't deliver on its empty promises. And yet, I'm reminded of author Leo Roston's words when he said, money can't buy happiness, but neither can poverty. We all understand that we just can't live without money. Now, I suppose there's somebody out there somewhere who survives on this remote piece of land. He lives off of nature. He has no bills whatsoever. In theory, I guess that exists. But for everyone else, including everybody here today, money goes hand in hand with living, as in you can't do one without the other. And just to set the record straight, money is not the root of all evil, which is an often and harmful misquote of the Bible. It's part of that song, by the way. The scripture actually says the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And the distinction is that one is the use of money as a means to an end, and the other is the chasing after money and things that money can buy as an end in itself. In fact, the Apostle Paul was writing to a young pastor named Timothy, and he named the actual cost of making money as the focus of your life, when he added to this text, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, some people, eager for money, chasing after money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. We wander from the power of our faith when we begin to bow down to money and the things that money can buy instead of the things that money can't buy. And we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Every year we teach on this subject, and I think it's always uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for those of us who talk about it and those of us in the seats who are hearing about it. I'm not sure why that is. I think it's a sensitive subject for several reasons. First of all, there are always some people who think that I'm talking about money because I'm after it, as in I'm after your money. So let me put you at ease. This is not a giving talk. Although I could make a strong case, have made a strong case for generosity and why you should be a generous person, but that's not today. And I'm not trying to convince you that you should take a vow of poverty. And I'm certainly not trying to guilt you into making a change in your life. What I'm trying to do is help. Because every year, for many of us, and I mean many, the hole just gets deeper as our finances get worse and the stress gets higher and the feeling is sort of greater despair and greater anxiety in a sense that there's just no way out of this. So instead of doing something, adopting a strategy that will lead to a win, we just buy a boat or a new car or whatever. And the feeling is a temporary high followed by a long-term hangover. Because the payment always lags behind the purchase, and the cost is realized in this multi-year sentence of interest-riddled payments. But it just doesn't have to be that way. Look, we just started 2025. I mean, it's still January. It's not too late to plot a course that makes your life different, and you can actually finish this year with no regrets regarding money. I'm going to show you how to do that, or at least we're going to touch on it. It would not be fair to say we're going to answer all the questions today, but we'll at least get started. And we'll have some really exciting opportunities for anyone who wants to take advantage after today of some really helpful resources that we can offer to you, that we want you to take advantage of. And then in a few minutes, we're going to end today, our time together, in a way that I don't think we have ever ended on this subject. And I think it's going to be memorable in a good way. You're going to want to be here all the way to the end. But if you want to finish 2025 with no regrets when it comes to money and finances, you need to know this. Taking deliberate, active steps is where success will be found. I'm going to give you some tools, and I often say I'm a words person. I think words matter, but especially on this subject, talk is cheap. You have to actually take action, and that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and it's hard, but it's doable. As Dave Ramsey says it, personal finance is only 20% head knowledge, it's 80% behavior. And that probably applies to a lot of subjects, but it especially applies here. You'll be interested to know, if you don't already, that the Bible has literally, this is not an exaggeration, literally thousands of verses and teaching on money management. And Jesus himself spoke more on money than he did any other subject, including heaven and hell put together. He did that because he understood that money is important in our lives, because money has the power to shape our lives. It also has the power to own our lives. And what we want is the former without succumbing to the latter. We want money to be a life-enhancing asset, not a life-sucking monster. And the determining factor between those two scenarios is not money itself, which is not inherently evil or neutral or bad. It's neutral. It has neither effect of good or bad. It's all about you. It's all about the decisions you make. You get to decide. So Jesus put it like this. He said, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So the question is, how do we serve God and at the same time allow money to serve us, not the other way around? How can we end 2025 with no regrets about how we handled the money that God entrusted to us this year? I'm going to give you three basic principles. There's probably 20. We only have time for 3 today. But I think these 3 have the power to change the trajectory of many people's financial future, and you can start that this year. So let's deal with the first one. The first one is stop the bleeding. We have to stop the bleeding. I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine that there's a patient who's been in an accident, and he's being rushed to the hospital, and his arm has been cut off. Now, I know it's gruesome. Some of you getting a little woozy right now. It'll be all right. There's a reason for the illustration. Hang in there. So the person's put in an ambulance from the site of the accident. They're rushed to the hospital. They get moved into the ER. IVs get hooked up. Drip bags are started. Monitors are beeping. And there are, doctors and nurses. They're working on the patient. And the doctor, he stands over the patient. He starts digesting all the facts. He's reading the monitors, reading the paperwork, reading the tests that have come back. The patient is losing blood, which is a catastrophic issue. It is life-threatening. It's literally the definition of an emergency. If it is not addressed immediately, the patient may not recover. Now, I want you to imagine that in the middle of that scenario, the doctor, he's scanning reports, he's reading the data, he's figuring it out, and all of a sudden he says, oh, I see that Billy here has high cholesterol. And he leans over to the semi-conscious patient and he says, Billy, you need to change your diet, bro. High cholesterol can lead to heart disease and all kinds of very serious conditions. No doctor in the world in that moment would care the least little bit about Billy's cholesterol, because triage requires that we stabilize the patient from the crisis before we deal with other important but lesser important chronic issues. The truth is, many of us are running around with our arm cut off, bleeding to death, but instead of dealing with that, we focus on less dire concerns. What I'm talking about is simple. Stop the bleeding means that we must learn and act on and practice living within our means. Or simply put, we talk about it like this: we don't spend what we don't have. Let me be more specific. No more debt. I'm talking about consumer debt here. No more debt. Just before the famously misquoted scripture that I read earlier, where Paul says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, just before that he says this: godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to be rich fall into temptation and a trap, and to many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Godliness with contentment is great gain. If we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Really? Really? How many of us, don't raise your hand, how many of us would really be content if we only had something to eat and something to wear? I wouldn't. You probably wouldn't. And I think that's okay. The point is to point to what we already have and ask this question: is it ever enough? Or maybe, when will it ever be enough? Because I don't know about you, but my favorite word seems to be more. And we lie to ourselves. We say something like, if I only had that, I'd be content. I know I've done this in my life many times. If I only had that, it'd be enough. And then we get that, and guess what? There's always another that to chase. But godliness with contentment means that I am at least willing to live within my means, with what I already have. We have to stop borrowing our way to improving our lives, which is really not improving our lives. Increasing our debt is this heavy burden that we just make worse by piling on more of it to buy what we've convinced ourselves that we must have, when in fact we don't. The bleeding is the ongoing adding to our debt load. And the statistics about this just keep getting worse. every time I talk about this, the data gets worse. This past November, credit card debt in America set a new record at nearly $1.2 trillion. Credit card debt increased 8% last year alone. And total household debt in America has ballooned to a record $18 trillion. Now, none of that probably means anything to you. It doesn't mean anything to me. I can't wrap my mind around a trillion or a billion. What matters is what you owe and how you're adding to it. But I want you to note Paul's words. He said, godliness with contentment is great gain. Not a new car with new payments is great gain, or financing a new cruise is a great gain, or leveraging the next 30 years of your future so that you can attend that college. If we want to have no regrets, we have to start making the hard choice to stop the bleeding. Let me just give you a couple of examples just to make sure everybody gets mad at me. I got a call one day from a friend not long ago, somebody who I'm close with, who I trust. They obviously trust me, and they're a part of our church. And he said these words. He said, hey, I found this car I really want. It's an SUV. It's big enough for my growing family. It's really, really nice. It'll last a long time, and the dealership is making me a smoking deal. And so I have this phrase that I use. I don't go where I'm not welcome. So I always try to figure out what's really happening here from my standpoint. So I said, hey, tell me how I can help you. Are you asking me to celebrate with you, which I can do, or are you asking me to give you advice? Basically, what I was saying was, why'd you call me about this without being rude? Like, I don't want to ask that. So, and so he said, I want you to tell me what you think about this purchase. And so I replied like this. I always reply like this. First, I want to tell you that I'm honored that you would ask for my advice. You could have called anybody. And I just feel honored that you would want to know what I think. I also want you to know that I'm aware you get to make the final decision. And if you pull up in my driveway with your brand new shiny SUV, I'm going to cheer for you. I'm going to cheer for you in your car. But since you asked, I think you're going to love that new car for about 6 weeks. And then you're going to have to make the first payment. And by the third payment, you're going to regret buying it, and it'll be too late. Because the new shiny thing that you're buying, it doesn't stay that way, but your $1,000 a month payment does. So I said, instead of buying a $75,000 car, why not take some of your savings, buy a $15,000 car, skip the payment, and the car will still be really nice, and you won't regret it later. He thanked me and hung up. I didn't know what he was going to do. About a week later, he pulled in my driveway with his very nice used SUV and thanked me for the advice. But the real thanks is going to come in the void of the massive payments that he will never have to make to buy something that he had temporarily convinced himself he had to have until he realized that he didn't. Let me just give you one more example, and this really is going to push some buttons. But the promise I made to all my kids was when they got into high school, we started talking about this, and I promised them that I would find a way to put them through 4 years of college. There were some stipulations, I'll tell you about that in a minute. But as they were teenagers, I had this conversation with them frequently. I said, you need to memorize this number. This is not the number. This is the number. I hope you go to med school, but this is all I'm doing, whatever. So, but the stipulation was I didn't want to borrow, and I didn't want them to borrow. I did that to myself. I was saddled with student loan debt for a large part of my adult life. I didn't want that for them, and I wasn't going to do it again to me. So my promise was, I will find a way to pay for your tuition and fees to a 4-year school. It has to be a state school in Virginia because that's where we live, and you're going to have to commute. And the way I said it was like this. To all 3 of my kids, I said, the reason is because I have a perfectly good piece of real estate called your bedroom that I can't rent to someone else, and I'm already paying for it. So if you want to live on campus somewhere, that's your decision. I'm going to cheer you on. I'm not mad about it, but you're going to have to find a way to pay for that yourself. I'll still cover the fees and stuff if you go to a state school. or you could live here, commute, and you could do that for free. And I want you to know, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about this at all. I wasn't obligated. There's no law that says I have to do this. I wanted to do this for my kids. This was the best I could do. Now, I know some people saved well. Some of you have saved well to send your kids to school and pay for all the things, and I wish I'd done that. I just didn't. So I figured out a way to still support them and to do it without any debt for me and any debt for them. By the way, my daughter, who is the oldest, did have to borrow a little. You'll find this if you have little kids. You tend to have fewer resources for the oldest and more resources for the youngest. And so she had to borrow about $10,000 total for her whole college education. I covered everything else. So when our family gets together, still today, she often brings that up so that she can show all her younger brothers and sisters how bad the oldest usually has it. And so this still goes on. About a year ago, I got so tired of this, I said to her, I am sick of you complaining. I want you to bring me that bill. I'm going to pay it off right now. She said, no way. I wouldn't have anything to complain about if you paid this bill off. So stop the bleeding. Figure out how much you owe. Like add it up, write it down, put it in a prominent place, and commit that you will finish this year with a number that's smaller, not larger. Stop the bleeding. Then you start digging out. Once you stop the bleeding, you have to address the debt that we've already accumulated. This is sort of like your arm's cut off, you figured that out, now we're going to deal with other important issues like cholesterol. So the proverb says it like this. It says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Unfortunately, this applies to many of us. In this proverb, I find this interesting. This was not written in English. It was originally written in Hebrew. Rich is singular and poor is plural. That doesn't translate into English. But I find that telling because there really are far more people who are in bondage because of debt than there are people who are free from it. Far more borrowers who voluntarily give up certain freedom and become slaves to their lenders. Being in debt's not a new thing. I mean, Solomon, who you might have heard of, wisest man who ever lived, whatever, he wrote this thousands of years ago. And it indicates that debt was an issue then, but it's only become an epidemic in the past half a century or so. But while the rest of the world is suffering under the weight of debt, you can be different. You can dig out of your debt. You can find freedom in the process. You really can do this. There are lots of ways, I suppose, to do it. But a few years ago, we kind of embarked on a journey together as a church. We found Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. We did it together, and it freed a bunch of us, myself included. And he teaches this format called the debt snowball. Now, I've taught this many times here. We put an easel up, and I'll write some numbers and show it to you. I decided not to do that today, but you can find it easily. Don't do it now. That would be kind of rude. But you can Google it or whatever and find Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. He'll illustrate it with numbers. Let me just give you the synopsis. You take your smallest debt. You basically list all your debts, and whatever one is on the bottom, the smallest one, you work to throw extra money at that and pay that one off. You make the regular payments everywhere else, pay off the smallest debt. And the way you do that is you start selling things. Dave Ramsey says, sell everything. Sell so much stuff the kids start thinking they're next. Like, you're just selling stuff, and you're throwing it all to that smallest debt. And you get a side hustle. You make a little bit of extra money. You throw all of that. You do whatever it takes to pay off the smallest debt. You pay no attention to interest rates. None of that matters. You just pay off the smallest one. And once you pay it off, you take the payment that you were making to that and you start putting it on the next smallest debt. And you're still selling stuff, and the kids are still afraid, and you still got a side hustle, and you're throwing money at that. And when that one gets paid off, you take the payment from the smallest one and the next smallest one that you no longer have, and you put that on the next one. And you keep, that's why it's called the snowball. The payment you're throwing at it gets bigger and bigger as you work your way up until you're throwing serious money at the problem, and you're making fast progress. Most people who use the debt snowball are able to pay off all of their non-mortgage debt within 5 years, many within 3 years. And that includes people in our church who have done this. But you have to be serious about it. It's fun on paper. It's a whole nother thing living it. These are painful choices you have to make, but the end result is amazing freedom. As Dave Ramsey puts it, if you live today like no one else, later on you can live like no one else. Imagine finishing 2025 with one or more of your debts paid off and well on your way. You can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel where you're paying them all off. You can do that. You just have to decide that you will. One more component, and this really is an abridged list. There's a lot more. These are the big items, I think. The last one I would say is you have to change your paradigm. None of this works if you don't change the way you think. So I've already got all that I need and a whole bunch of things that I don't need. That's the paradigm shift. I have so many luxuries. You have so many luxuries compared to the rest of the world. Really. But if I'm being honest, I fight to remind myself of this all the time. When we lost power in Ice-Mageddon a couple of weeks ago, and I lost power too, and it was in my new house, and I wasn't sure, how long it takes for them to get the power. But I didn't know where I was on the grid and all that stuff, and so I hook up my portable generators, kind of a small thing, and I was able to hook up a heater in one room. It was pretty cold. Hook up a heater in one room, shut the door. Room got nice and toasty, as warm as I wanted it to be, and I was able to hook up the internet and run a TV, and I was able to keep my refrigerator going, and I was able to get the water pump on, so I had water. But with all of that, even with all of that, the way that I griped about this, you would have thought I was sleeping outside naked in the cold. I just kept griping about all the things we didn't have. And I used words like, this is unacceptable, and this has to be fixed, and I have to get a generator that's bigger so I can do the whole house. But it wasn't true. It isn't true. In the past week or two, I've watched these images of these people in Gaza crowded around these food distribution centers by the hundreds. And this is not a political statement. I'm looking at these crowds. Many of these people are kids, and they're crying because they haven't eaten in days, and they're trying to get to the front of the line so that they can get some rice in a bowl. And I get aggravated when I go to the grocery store and they're out of 2% milk and I have to buy 1% milk. And I gripe like the world is ending because my internet slows down, or because my delivery comes in 3 days instead of the promised 2. I sometimes am amazed and ashamed at what a spoiled person I act like. Anyway, we lost power, and I insisted. I can't live like this, which is not true, but we're going to buy a generator, and Susan and I have a budget that we live on. We agreed on. And so she didn't say, no, you're not going to do that, or anything. She said this: okay, what will we take off of our list in order to make room for this generator you say we have to have? It's the right question, and it's the right way to think about it. I can do it, but I cannot do all of it. And that kind of thinking, when you change your paradigm to say I can't have everything, what's most important, it really causes you to prioritize those things that are critically important in your life. And it makes me realize, I don't have to have anything else. It's my modern version, our modern version of Paul saying, if you got food and clothes, that'll be enough. I don't need one more thing. I've got all I need already, and I mean all. You know what the truth is? I'm rich. You know what the truth is? You're rich. And that's the paradigm shift that we have to implement in our lives. God has already provided for us community and freedom and health and family and luxury like few people in the world enjoy. And so lately, I've started doing a better job of regularly taking inventory, particularly when my mind starts saying, you gotta have this. I wanna shift my paradigm. So last week, I got to see all 5 of my grandkids at the same time. And they adore me. They love Angie and Papa more than anyone on the planet. And I get to watch these little ones who are also my favorite people. I get to watch them grow up and grow closer to each other and play together and run around in my house and love and adore us. And I think to myself, I am so unspeakably rich. And all my kids are nearby, and we see them often, and we like them too, though not nearly as much as their children. And I have some friends that I love, and they love me. And I get to do life with them. And the people I work with here at our church, some of whom are also really close friends, all of whom make up the most focused, Jesus-loving, church-advancing, hardest-working team anywhere on the planet. And I get to be a part of it. And I married my best friend. And we're still best friends 35 years later. I am so rich. Unspeakably rich. I had a birthday 2 weeks ago, and I got a card from one of my kids who took the time to share some reflection on their life and on my contribution to it. And the card said, in part, Dad, I want to be the kind of parent to my kids that you have been to me. I want to model my life on the example that you set. And I reflected on that card every day, and I realized, honestly, if I never have anything else, I've got enough, because my life is already rich, and so is yours. Do you know it? You don't need anything else, as in not one more thing. So we were thinking about how to finish today. It's always a little bit like, how do you finish a talk on money? And a member of our team introduced me to this song I'd never heard before, and it just wrecked me. And it's become, I've listened to it many times now, it's become one of the most powerful, reflective musical pieces I have ever heard, and a constant reminder of how rich my life is and why. I hope you'll hear these words. I hope you will receive this moment for the power that it is. But before we do it, would you let me pray with you? God, forgive me, forgive us. We forget. But remind us today again. Remind us every day. Remind us today and tomorrow and the next day. We're just so rich. And we're just so grateful. We give you credit for it and thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
And when I get to heaven and we're lined up outside the pearly gates, well, we're all walking, small talking, mingling. I already know what I'm gonna say. When we all trade stories of what we did with our lives, I won't say that I played music or could sing. When it's my turn, I think I'll smile. Say I was the richest man in the world, father to a baby girl, and my boy that I know loves me was famous to a few good friends, and beside me to the end was my wife who is so lovely. And I don't know who could ask for any more. Richest man in the world, richest man in the world. I may never live in Montecito, probably never own a jet. And the sands of time will wear down all the fame and fortune till I don't have any left. I don't want some great big funeral, I don't want flowers on my grave. Just play this song or have someone write this somewhere. I'd like to let the record stay. Here lies the richest man in the world, father to a baby girl, and my boy that I know loved me was famous to a few good friends, and beside me to the end was my wife who is so lovely. And I don't know who could ask for any more. Richest man in the world, richest man in the world. And you can spend your whole life wanting what you don't have, or you can find the beauty in the things you do. So I am the richest man in the world, father to a baby girl, and my boy that I know loves me. Famous to a few good friends, and beside me to the end is my wife who is so lovely. And I don't know who could ask for any more. No, I cannot have dreamed for any more. Richest man in the world, richest man in the world.
Most of us are so much richer than we think we are. We have much to be thankful for that has little or nothing to do with money. And that's an important perspective to keep. And we can manage the money that we do have better in a way that honors God. So this year, let's stop the bleeding. Let's start digging out, and let's change our paradigms. We look forward to praying with you tomorrow on day 9 of 21 Days of Prayer. Join us in person at any of our campuses, or watch it live right here online, or catch up on Facebook or YouTube whenever it's a good time for you. We'll see you soon.